How to implement JSON Web Tokens to secure your Web API. In this video, we cut through the bells and whistles and look at the essentials of implementing JWT in your Web API. But first, why use JSON Web Tokens? JSON Web Tokens have become very popular because it is a stateless authentication. There's no need for session management on the server, which makes it ideal for microservices. JWT tokens are signed using HMAC and RSA encryption to ensure they cannot be tampered with. Also, JWT is a standardized token format and works well across multiple platforms. We'll start with a new .NET Core Web API. And for this demonstration, we'll be using .NET 8. In your project, install the package microsoft.aspnetcore.authentication.jwt bearer. Ensure to select the correct version for the framework you're using. In the program.cs file, we add authentication using the JWT bearer authentication scheme. In the options, pass your domain name to the issuer and audience. And for the symmetric key, pass a byte array of your private key string. Of course, this should be retrieved from some secret location, but for this demo, we're cutting out the bells and whistles to get a clearer understanding of implementing JWT. Then we also need to add the authorization service. We added a models folder to hold a class to represent the user's login credentials. In the controllers folder, add a new empty API controller. We'll call it something like auth controller. In the controller, add a HTTP post endpoint for login. This should accept the user credentials from the body of the request. Again, we're just going to hard code the verification of the username and password, but you should of course use something like .NET Identity Authentication or your own method to verify the user's credentials. You'll find video links in the description below that will guide you on how to create user authentication in your app. Once the user has been authenticated, you can call a method to generate the JWT token using the user's username. You can then return the new token, or if user authentication failed, return unauthorized. We placed our method to generate the token straight in the controller, but it would serve you better in the long run to put methods like these in its own service class that you can inject into the controller. Here we use the username for the JWT claim subject and use a new GUID for the JWT ID. We get a symmetric key again from the byte array of our super secret key string and encrypt this with the SHA-256 algorithm. Now we can build our token, passing our domain for the issuer and audience and the claims we created above for claims. You can set an expiration time for the token and of course pass it the encrypted key. Essentially, that's it for setting up a symmetric JSON Web Token. To test the JSON Web Token, we're going to add another empty API controller in our controllers folder. Imagine this is a normal controller in your application that is used for handling your application requests. In a more complex system, however, you may want to separate your authentication API from your application API, especially when using something like a microservices architecture. Our new values controller will have one get endpoint that simply returns a list of strings. To secure this endpoint, we decorate it with the authorize attribute. You can secure all endpoints in the controller by adding the authorize attribute to the controller instead. Let's test our endpoints. You can either open the HTTP file in your project root to enter requests, or go to the View menu, Other Windows, and Endpoint Explorer. Here you'll get a list of the endpoints in your API. To add a HTTP request, right-click an endpoint and select Generate Request. We've added the login post request and a GET request for the values. For the login request, we need to add the user credentials in the request content. Make sure your API is running, then click Send on the login request. A response window will open, and if the request was successful, it will return the JSON Web Token. We need to copy this token and use it in our GET request for the authorization parameter. You'll have to specify that it's a bearer key, followed by the token value. Then, when you click Send on the GET request, it will return the result if your token was valid. To call an endpoint from your client app using the JSON token, you need to add the authorization parameter to the HTTP client's header, and give it the values bearer and the token value. To further secure your web API, make sure to always use HTTPS. Store your security keys in a secure location, set reasonable expiration times on your tokens, and implement public-private keys using asymmetric encryption. Thank you for watching our video. For more tutorials on C#, hit subscribe and click the reminder. Give us a like so the video can be visible to more people.